And good evening from Philadelphia. Frank here. We've got a special Monday evening edition of UFO News Network Sunday. We've got with us today, I'll tell you what, let me bring on in my co-host for this evening, Chant Hanna. Chant, good evening to you, and why don't you introduce our special guest for this evening?
Good evening, Frank. Thank you. We have a very special show today for our listeners. Today we have Alex Chionetti, a domestic and international film to television producer and distributor. He was involved with the Ancient Aliens TV series documentary and was a producer of 15 episodes of that. He's also known for the films Down the Shore, 2011, Brando Unauthorized in the same year, and Destination Truth in 2007, a consultant producer for Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind 40th Anniversary digital campaign. He is also a documentary producer and writer and did development for cable documentaries such as the Sci-Fi Channel, NBC Universal, Fox Television, the History Channel, the National Geographic, and other shows. He attended the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, getting his master's in film and television, documentary film, and Hynek called him the most active field researcher he knew. Alex was also the editor of the IUR International UFO Report, which was done in Spanish, and director of the investigations of QFOS in Buenos Aires. Alex, welcome to the show.
Welcome, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you
tonight.
for being on the show. Yes, thank you.
It's great to have you here, and let's not beat around the bush. We're going to have Alex back, actually, on a big roundtable discussion we're going to have on South American UFOs next month. But the Project Blue Book TV show premiered last Monday night. It really did get a lot of attention. Got a lot of viewers. They ran it twice last Tuesday night, back to back, and a total of 3.1 million viewers. And what a lot of those folks may not realize is that the original idea for doing a Blue Book series based on the experiences of Alan Hynek researching UFOs in conjunction with the United States Air Force, starting back in the late 40s and going right up until the late 60s, was actually Alex's original idea that got lifted from him, basically, by some folks over in A&E. And Alex, let's get right down to it. Why don't you tell us all about that?
Oh, it's a long story. It's a kind of unfortunately, I always was enthusiastic about Hynek since I immigrated to this country. Alan was my friend. I consider myself a disciple and a student when he came originally to my country, and we have a scientific teenager group, and he was our mentor, and we have a commission of investigation, and we have correspondence with him, and we have a magazine in that time called UFO Press, and Dr. Hynek chose our group as a representative of QFOS. I was director of investigation, and I started researching UFOs in the late 70s, in the flap wave of 78. It was coincidental with the
This is Alex, this is in Argentina, correct?
Yes, Argentina, Buenos Aires, and was kind of that wave which started in 77 and prolonged to all 78 was our fire baptism as field researchers. And that was the time of the Close Encounters, Spielberg masterpiece, and was so many kind of influence of the American ufology in our uprising. But Hynek chose us, and I started to be translator and also editor of his bulletin, International UFO Report. He had been made. He had been publishing since 73 in his QFOS in Evanston, Illinois. And we started this kind of friendship. One of the reasons I immigrated to the States was my friendship with him. It was not the only one, but one in my search of scholarships and my progress as
Just so long as
researcher.
just to clear some history up on Hynek for the folks, he started consulting with the Air Force during the Project Sign Grudge era in the very late 40s before they actually, I guess, rebranded it really as Project Blue Book. So he was with him right up until the end, I believe, or very close to the end. So he was with that U.S. Air Force investigation really for the better part of 20 years, probably longer than anyone else. And then after they shut that down, he decided to open up his own private research institute. Is that about right?
Yes. Yeah, and 69, and he created his private group, and that was the QFOS, and was one of the more celebrated groups with so many international branches in the late 70s. And he got stardom when he was Spielberg used his coin name, The Close Encounters of the Third Kind, as was his classification, his definition of Close Encounter of the First, Second, and Third Kind. And that was kind of his stardom and more massive. But we have to remember 78 was a big flap all over the world. That there was so much attention, and the presence also of the movie circulating, being released all over the planet, have a big important synchronicity that produce a kind of a new conscious about the subject of the mysterious flying saucers. Now we wouldn't call more flying saucers since the time of Blue Book, but we start to call it UFOs. And the ufology was in motion. And I remember Hynek, in my first years, he trying to help me with my dreams of filmmaking too. He tried to introduce me to Spielberg. He introduced me to his older son, Joel Hynek, who was a master in special effects already in the decade of the 80s. But I always want to have the chance to do something about his life. And in the last years, I was trying to see if I could develop a feature film of a series. And 3 years ago, I started to work more hard on that. More in the last 5 years, 2-3 years. And my first option was trying to do it with the company of Spielberg and Amblin. But Amblin Television, no matter I have some good friends there, they didn't really care. I never couldn't present the project directly to Steven Spielberg. And in the same time, I was pitching the story to the History Channel, but I have a good, I think I used to have a good relation with history after working for Ancient Aliens and also for UFO Hunters. 2 series I was consulting producer and key researcher. And 3 years ago this month, I pitched the story. I know when the head of production and development, he introduced me to another of his subordinates, or one of the head also in development and production. This was an event. I used to attend to this event called Real Screen, where you have a kind of collective pitching. You have session of pitching stories, and I pitched three projects. But the more important was pitching the story of Hynek and the Project Blue Book. And also I brought in the concept the son of Hynek, who was my friend. With Joel, we were having some analysis, video analysis. He had been helping me in the last 10, 15 years to analyze some UFO cases. They were caught in video, important cases. And I thought, well, he was going to be one of the hosts of the show. And beside that, the idea was kind of do a reconstruction of the old cases and the case is not only the Blue Book. After he retired, we were going to kind of reconstruct many of the UFOs cases between 73 and to the present. And well, until the death of Hynek. Well, the death of Hynek was 1986.
And basically, your idea was to do a documentary series on these investigations.
It was a documentary series, 10 episodes with many cases, Hynek research, the important ones, and do all the historical reconstruction too.
Hynek's son, let me jump in. Hynek's son was with you. He's a part of this project, and he's with you during this pitch.
Right. He was interested in being this series. And after I pitched, they back to me, they were interested, they asked me more kind of information, how I see it, how I see the characters. And I start to kind of develop it more as more kind of docudrama too, where the character was not only Hynek, but also was Major Quintanilla. Hector Quintanilla also had been part of my life. I will tell you another incident, but I was a friend of him, and also I was publisher of his memoirs book, who was, Quintanilla was the last director of Project Blue Book until 69, from 63 to 69. And I have that kind of files, and I was doing kind of the confrontation between Hynek as a believer and the officers of the book as a more skeptic. Well, okay. Quintanilla was not totally skeptic. He was a physicist, and he had many people said the Blue Book was more a public relations office, but it's not true. They really research with dedication and scientific merit that the last years, no?
Yeah.
I said, no, well, let me finish.
Oh, sure.
And I continue, and they were asking more as developing more kind of information, how I see it, these characters, how I see Hynek in relation with his family, and I started to get suspicious. And the next call, they said, oh, sorry, I tried in our development meetings to push your project, but we are enough with Ancient Aliens, and another documentary, another kind of series on this subject is not, they feel is not too dynamic. And after that, I couldn't do anything. And 1 year later, I have the surprise to read in one foreign publication that History was doing the series with Zemeckis. And the same day, I called Joel Hynek and said, we don't know anything. I talking with my brother, but Hynek have 2 sons, and we are not going to sue History. I don't care where these people coming. That was he told me. No, I said, we are surprised. That means they develop and they launch the announcement of the series coming without asking permission to Allen Hynek's sons. We're very, very curious. And after another conversation I had with Hynek, with Joel, he said, well, I don't know what we are going to do, but this again, I don't know if it's going to be a legal matter, but we don't know about this project. I don't know about this guy, David O'Leary, who they don't know where he was coming from. No matter in the family of Hynek were some interesting to do something about their father. And don't forget, he's a filmmaker too. And later on, when he read this, he said, oh, Alex, this is your project. This is so similar to your project, he told me, and that this is the same. And later on, I discovered he was consultant with his brother. And very, very kind of disappointment, but he was fair with me. I said, oh no, I am exclusive now, and I cannot talk about my father and I cannot talk about Project Blue Book. No matter Project Blue Book is public domain. Everybody could talk, no?
Right.
No, but money talks, and that is the way the corporations and television companies work. And it's you are not protected by good lawyers. You are risking always yourself when you are pitching. But I was pitching, but I know the development. I work with this company, and I have confidence. I didn't need to sign any kind of NDA. But they already know me, and I think my work had been very, very interesting and positive for the ratings of the networks.
Sure. Ancient Aliens is in its 13th season now. How did you get involved in that show? And that is one that has really stood the test of time. I don't think there's been a UFO-related show that has lasted anywhere near as long. Tell us a little about your involvement in all that, and why do you think Ancient Aliens has succeeded all these years, where so many other UFO shows are sort of one and done?
Ancient Aliens is a religion. Don't forget that. It's a new religion. Yeah, you don't go to church Sunday, but Friday night you have the same ecstasies. You have the same kind of communion with the gods of the chariots.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, thank you. But how I get involved, I was as I was kind of working with history, with development. I was trying to do some specials about mysteries of archaeology, lost civilizations. One of the head of development, he introduced me to the company Prometheus Entertainment, and in that time they were doing one kind of follow-up. It was kind of tie-in to Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skulls, and what was a movie also. I was kind of consultant. I work in a special kind of marketing and education regarding to the role of the explorers and mysteries. Before I met the Prometheus, and Prometheus was kind of trying to do something with Giorgio, and Giorgio Sokolous was doing one of the last segments about the Crystal Skulls, tying with the Indiana Jones story. And I brought one of my research in South America with ancient mysteries, and that was started a relation, and I work in Indiana Jones special, and the spin-off was Ancient Aliens. For the Ancient Aliens was kind of creation of Stephen Burns with Sokolous. And since the pilots, I work bringing my research to the original episode and to the next 2 seasons and more seasons, but I developed around 150 segments, and they're still using some, and I don't see any monies from that. But they come repeating, and it turns in a franchise and turn kind of a brand name, and I think it had been good also for ufology. No matter von Daniken, I interviewed von Daniken in the 90s trying to resolve one of another mystery I researched for so many years, named the Caves of Ecuador, the Caves of Tajos. And Daniken was kind of always not too convinced about UFOs were today showing in our planet. He was more always in the past. He was always more in the past frame than in the present. But now, in the years, he started to be more open, and he was not skeptical anymore regarding to present visitations. No, but
Right.
in
That's a good point.
my work always was the past and the present. I was also following his theories, and in my early research, I was an ancient astronaut theorist.
Alex, I have a question for you. Do you feel like you've been treated in a derisive manner like Dr. Hynek was with respect to your having been involved in the Ancient Aliens show?
No, not totally. I think it's kind of separate. We had been many ufologists where we were we have the feet in two sides of the river. I always consider the archaeological aspect, but archaeology has been a passion for me as ufology, as also cinema and media journalism. But maybe, yeah, if you find some purists, but they are not more purists anymore. Yeah, maybe kind of some friends in the scientific community, they thought I was living that kind of perspective, more the perspective of the scientific ufology, but some side of ufology don't believe in the ancient astronauts, as I was explaining just now. Also, some of the theories of the lost civilizations were skeptical to the UFOs today. No, for example, Carl Sagan used to believe in the possible contact in the ancient Mesopotamia, in Egypt, but he was a skeptic about the cases today. I remember, for example, when I met Carl Sagan in Harvard in Boston, I was trying to interview him after a lecture, a fantastic lecture he gave to us, to the young people there, talking about the nuclear winter. And I approached Sagan, and in between lines, I mentioned the name of Hynek, and Sagan kind of upraised his crest, and he started to say, "Oh no, if you are connected with Hynek, that means you believe in UFOs." And at the end of the interview, and he grabbed he had his baby in his arms. I remember it was raining. It was a raining afternoon, late afternoon, after the lecture, and he started to run, and I couldn't catch it. He never again answered my phone calls.
Alex, when did you start to believe in the possibility of extraterrestrial civilizations?
Oh, I was an early bird. I was kind of I was in a Catholic school, and I was not believing what I was being taught, and I used to escape to read in the library of the fathers books on explorations, and following also the theories of Teilhard de Chardin, who was a Jesuit paleontologist who was kind of trying to give an explanation about the evolution of mankind and how the spirit incarnates in us, and that kind of question between heaven and hell. And I started to kind of, I don't know, my imagination was trying to kind of turning myself in a science fiction writer. I was kind of a science fiction buzz who was so dedicated to read all the American science fiction. I love all the classics, and that was my starting. But when I started to read about mysteries of the past and the present, and get embedded with the school of fantastic realismo fantastico, I decided to more research reality, kind of, and read non-fiction books. And there was a place in Argentina called Cerro Colorado, what we used to go in the summers. We were some pictograph, some kind of rock paintings, illustrating also star maps and that was also one opening, and that was also the period of Chariot of the Gods, and and the Chariot of the Gods was a big kind of turn in our beliefs, our credo on Catholic Christian faith, and that made me to kind of look for what was this painting, how these Indians were too advanced to make these constellation maps on the rock, and very advanced. Also, culture would disappear. They were kind of fair skin with beard. They live in caves. That connected me with my research on interterrestrial worlds. And near there was a landing case, and that was my first kind of case. I went to study, and I see the traces. They saw UFO, all the town nearby, and was burned in the form of a horseshoe, and I was taking samples in that fall of '77 was my first case, kind of 40 years ago, when I took samples, and I took a sample of a palm who was perfect burn. But after I remember kind of when we were more child, we were, my brother and myself and my parents, we were in a famous route coming from the South Atlantic coast, and we saw kind of a metal stationary object on the sky, and that we left the car, we went to see what that, and was the time of the Apollo missions, and everybody also was kind of curious about our jump to the space. We were leaving the Earth, no? And also, how was the connection of our ancient ancestors with the past? Also, they lived the Earth, they were connection with the gods, they were connection with something what was not necessarily mythical or spiritual, but physical, and that was the questions I started to do. And also, at an early age, I wrote a book on the parallel dimensions. I very jump in a few years to that kind of search, and it's a book would combine the past and the present and the mysteries of mind and the space and time. Yeah.
Frank, did you want to bring up Project Blue Book regarding your review?
The show is out there, and of course, Alex has already gone into some detail about basically how the idea was ripped off from him, and they basically decided to take his idea for a documentary series on all these cases and turn them into a fictional series. Basically, and I did watch it. Alex, you told me you didn't. I can understand why you wouldn't want to watch it. But I've watched it. Chance watched it. A lot of people have watched it. They like, at least they tuned in. So the hype got them to tune in. We'll see how well they hold that pretty big audience that they got last Tuesday night. But the first show, I have to tell you, was a huge disappointment. They just they fictionalized too much in terms of tone and the way that the show is shot. It's basically an X-Files ripoff. They took what's regarded as a very good UFO case from 1948, the Gorman dogfight case. They did take a couple of elements from it that sort of surprised me, that kind of got my attention, especially in the opening scene. There's an opening scene where the UFO encounter takes place. One little detail that they got right was where the pilot, Gorman, actually, in the show he was called Fuller, but the reality was it was an Air National Guard pilot named Gorman. He actually buzzed the high school football stadium, and they got that detail right, and I was kind of surprised and kind of optimistic. Some other details they didn't get quite right in that initial encounter. They had they had the UFO actually colliding with the plane, which in fact did not happen, obviously. but still, that opening sequence was not bad at all. I was kind of interested to see how many more little details they'd get right. But from there, it went downhill. The producers of the show have talked about how much research they've done, and yeah, it's a drama. But to be honest with you, they took the real story and they basically took a big giant hour-long crap all over it. That's my opinion in a nutshell. Chant, you want to jump in here and give us some of your thoughts on the show?
Yeah, I don't have a glowing review of it either. I didn't care for it, but at the same time, I think accusing the History Channel of indulging in fantasy is like accusing the movie industry of the same. And they definitely fulfilled their role regarding that with this show. Project Blue Book begins at a seminal time in the investigation of UFOs and alien contact, and the first episode introduces it. At the beginning of the show, Hynek's character states, "There is a difference between science fiction and informed speculation, although both do require an open mind." Hynek's character says this in the show. This show is fulfilling that remark and not in a good way. Aside from the usual mysterious and enigmatic special effects, most scenes are shot in the dark or with less light than I'd like to see for clarity. Part of the show banks on the premise that there's a public distrust of the U.S. government. I'm not sure when the distrust of the government happened exactly, but historically speaking, the Vietnam War, Watergate scandal, and Dr. Hynek doing an about-face regarding the Project Blue Book report is a good start. Around the 6-minute mark enters the 1947 Roswell UFO crash, the introduction of it, along with a few other UFO-related incidents in different parts of the country. The U.S. government is informing Hynek they believe there is a mass hysteria regarding UFO activity, and they want to stop this from happening. The way it is portrayed in the show is that the government wants to inject rational thinking, as they put it, back into the minds of the public by refuting any and all UFO-related reports, hence a top-secret program called Project Blue Book. Later on, Henry Fuller is brought up, who is really George Gorman, a veteran fighter pilot of the Second World War, and with the North Dakota Air National Guard. This is where the U.S. government details their nefarious plan to disengage the public's attention from UFO activity and to represent the UFO phenomenon as unreal, with the help of a real astronomer and professor to debunk this hot topic. Who better to do this than Dr. Hynek? This is probably one of the most accurate parts of the show, which is not saying much. They should delve into the military and government role in this story to maintain interest by their audience, because now it's lapsing into a Spielberg movie. The 10-minute mark finds Dr. Hynek saying he wants to be recognized just like his heroes, Galileo and Kepler, were, as though he would be standing on the shoulders of intellectual giants by explaining UFO reports. I don't believe Hynek wanted to be recognized the way the History Channel depicts Hynek here. At the 32-minute mark, later on in the show, Hynek speaking to the Fuller pilot at the hospital, which to me is symbolic of Hynek coming to the realization there are legitimate UFO cases as a whole, and the pilot symbolic of all witnesses who have had an authentic UFO encounter. The show is setting the audience up to understand Hynek will be facing an uphill battle in his role to refute any kind of UFO activity, authentic or not. I think it's important to maintain some realism about the history of both Hynek and Project Blue Book, which is why I'd like to bring up the 27 mark of the show, the 27-minute mark, where there's a fictional plane crash, which is what brings Dr. Hynek and a pilot who is the same U.S. government agent together in a convenient manner to then segue into Hynek meeting up with the Fuller pilot at the hospital. I thought the plane crash idea was ridiculous and unnecessary. As far as accuracy regarding the show, matching the Project Blue Book Gorman UFO dogfight case, I would say it's extremely weak. Regarding entertainment value, I would give it about a 3 out of 10. The History Channel shows are not really built to give a definitive synopsis of actual events, but more of exactly what they claim to be, which is a drama series.
Well, Chant, they could have done it a little bit more closely to the actual case. One thing that they did actually get right was the little point they had about the elevated radiation readings on the plane itself. That, in fact, did happen. They did get that part right. But eventually they came up with the lighted balloon. That part, again, was accurate. That was an explanation that they thought was pretty accurate. And they ultimately went with that. let's see, they found that Gorman's Mustang P-51, which is also not the plane they used. I don't know if that's that big a deal, but any aviation buff would notice right away that the plane that they used on the show was not a P-51. That was pretty clear, but that was measurably more radioactive than other fighters, which had not flown for several days. This was taken as evidence that Gorman had flown close to an atomic-powered object. So there was that. That was actually accurate. But the rest of it, the representation of Gorman, Fuller as being all like huddled up in a blanket. This guy was a World War II veteran already at this point. At the end of the show, they're sort of dragging him off in this blanket and giving him some sort of an injected lobotomy or something to keep him from talking. It was ridiculous. The fact is that Gorman stayed in the Air National Guard another 20 years beyond this and retired as a lieutenant colonel. So he continued to get promoted. He had a fine career after all this. But he did say this: I am convinced that there was a definite thought behind its maneuvers. I am further convinced that the object was governed by the laws of inertia because its acceleration was rapid but not immediate, and although it was able to turn fairly tight at considerable speed, it still followed a natural curve. The object was not only able to turn and outspeed my aircraft, but was able to attain a far steeper climb and was able to maintain a constant rate of climb far in excess of my aircraft. So there was a lot of opportunity to do a much better drama. That there was disagreement between Hynek and who was the captain, the man in charge of Blue Book, who is, I guess, sort of modeled after Edward Ruppelt, but not entirely. He's sort of in that slot at least, and I don't know if it was a very good categorization of the man. Sorry about that. And you bring out a really good point. There's no way that they're going to try to recreate the case by launching a balloon. You've got different wind patterns and so on from the night of the case. So the idea of trying to recreate that and fly around it and end up in a crash was absolutely absurd and kind of unnecessary, really, since, let's face it, if Hynek wanted access to speak to Gorman/Fuller directly, he could have gotten it. He was there with the guy who was in charge of Blue Book. So even though neither one of those guys were actually there, they sent their anonymous at this point ATIC investigators out to talk to Gorman. That's some dramatic license I can live with, actually putting Hynek and quote-unquote Ruppelt out there, and I mean that sort of thing is fine, but the categorization of Gorman and the immediate ramping up of the sort of X-Files conspiracy behind all this. The truth is, the accuracy is that the Air Force did want to get out of investigating at least UFO sightings from the public. This was not one of those cases, obviously. Gorman was an Air National Guard pilot. But the news did get out. There were additional witnesses. There were ground witnesses from a commercial air traffic control tower, and there was also another pilot who was up in the air, a private pilot who was up in the air at the time, a Dr. Cannon, who was up in the air in his Piper Cub, and he had also seen it, and also let ground control know that he had seen it. This would be another element that you've got two witnesses essentially saying the same thing. They could have talked to a Dr. Cannon character as well. That wouldn't have been a problem, I don't think. Instead of lapsing immediately into basically what this show is, which is a subpar X-Files ripoff that takes a great case and basically squanders the opportunity in order to rip off a show that is 20 years old and nobody really cares about that much anymore. So
Alex, that sums it up. Then it sounds like you didn't have a very good review of it, Frank.
Yes, that would be fair to say.
Alex, I heard you react a little bit when Frank was talking. Did you have any input on what we were talking about?
No, very good. You should be doing reviews for the Hollywood Reporter. Variety. Yeah, very good. Congratulations. I used to be a movie critic. Yes, of course, I agree totally, and it's funny, yeah. The name of X-Files, I used it in my original pitch to describing the character of Hynek and the Blue Book, and in opposition. No, so Hynek as a kind of a believer, kind of Mulder, yeah, and the officer of the Blue Book, in my case was Quintanilla, more kind of a Scully, no?
Right,
Scully.
right.
Yeah, but
it looks like with the
my take was kind of more serious. I never expect they're going to bring Hynek to a pulp and pop character, and what the end with the assassination of Gorman, that was, I said, we kind of is kind of too comic book, and I think Hynek will we dislike it, and it also is very offensive to our Air Force, to the USA. I know they cover up, and they kind of they disinform, and they hide under the carpet a lot of cases and good information in the last 30, 50 years. But still, to get to that point, to put us bad guys turning and criminals is too much. I think Dr. Hynek will not like the portrait of himself. He was totally different guy. If you could see on YouTube many of his presentations and interviews, he was a kind of a very kind of jovial and kind of he was believing in science, and he believed in mystery. He was fascinating as a kid when he wanted to kind of recollect information. And I remember when I showed my drawings of my field research, how he was fascinated to see the visual aspect, no? How witness they draw. I always get very happy with the witness was making drawings of the case, no? And not only the mine. In that time, was photography, but they were not video. The use of video was a different thing. They just started to kind of be the video as an evidence. I remember he gave me in one of his trips a video about the case in Guatemala. He loved that case of Guatemala City, that metal object, and he gave me 2 or 3 videos of his collection, but I still keep in my collection. And but that the spirit of scientific research is not represented in the series. Is hero, anti-hero, I think is totally betraying. In the case they really totally stole my concept, they betray my original concept. But for the different parallel creation, still is very kind of childish to use his name, no? And I don't understand how the family allow that kind of take. But we are in the 21st century. We are in kind of Trump land, and this kind of America of today is not the same America Dr. Hynek lives, lived before, no?
And it's sort of insulting to the intelligence of the audience because this is, now Jerome Clark, who I'm sure you're familiar with, Alex.
Sure.
I'm not sure how familiar everybody listening, but he's a ufologist from back in the day. I believe he's passed away since then. But he considered
no, he's alive.
Oh, is he still alive? Okay, because I know he's been at it for a long time. I don't see that he's still all that active, but I know he goes back a ways. But he was of the opinion that the Gorman case is sort of an overrated case, that he does buy the Air Force's explanation that it was a lighted weather balloon. It's one of those things you can argue back over. And the idea of presenting the case very forensically, very accurately the way it is, and sort of let the people decide, and dramatically have some back and forth between Hynek and the Ruppelt the guy, the character who's in the Ruppelt slot, so to speak, and has some back and forth between both of them. Yeah, we want to get this explained. Hynek's holding out. I mean, there can be some drama in there without ramping up the melodrama and the X-Files ripoff all the way to 11, right in literally in the second scene, literally while the Ruppelt character is trying to pitch Hynek on joining and helping out with the project. They're playing this dark, forbidding music in the background. It was totally inappropriate, and that's when I was a little bit leery about where is the show exactly going, and how much of a X-Files ripoff of this show really going to be. And unfortunately, they really, like I said, they took it up to 11.
Alex, when we were talking earlier today, just to ask you a different question, we kind of, you went over some very interesting things. You said that you helped to feed information to UFO CAT, the IBM system, to use statistics to understand the behavior of the phenomena and make predictive models of sightings, and you continue working on this. You continued to work on this after the death of Dr. Hynek with Jacques Vallée and Dr. Willie Smith and Vicente Ballester Olmos. And also you explained a little bit about helping to open up certain files with regards to 2 countries. Can you explain a little bit about all of that?
Well, we're coming back to the late 70s. Yeah, in that period, Hynek was focusing to kind of recollect information of all over the world and to submit it to an IBM program. Hynek was trying to see if getting accurate and better field research, not only what many of the catalogs were based in newspaper clips of not only in the US, but all over the world. And sometimes the growth of the information was coming from the press. I don't kind of criticize my fellow journalists saying they couldn't they couldn't do a good survey, interviewing witness, in all these years from 1950s to today. But for example, I always criticize the Roswell case. I think Roswell case was very bad investigated. And we have this kind of some events when they happen, you don't have the right people around. And also, going to another extreme case, but the JFK assassination was very bad research in the first 24 hours, on the first 48 hours. But passing on another kind of level of reconstruction of cases, it's always the guy who interview if he's skilled enough or not. And Hynek used to tell us the witness, the UFO is the witness. It's so important, the testimony. And that really kind of forged in us, in fire, that kind of concept, no? But the witness contain that information. If you don't have a photo, if you don't have a video today, you still have to be based in the testimony you are capturing from the person, and the witness are totally different idiosyncrasy. But imagine all this kind of 50, 70 years of ufology and all the information dispersed. And the fate of Allen was trying to create predictive models using the information, also the system of Jacques Vallée, of Taiwan, 2, 3, 4, incorporate that classification to the computers and to see how the phenomena was behaving. That was the creation of the UFO CAT. The UFO CAT and was his big enterprise. And when he left Chicago and he went to Arizona, Scottsdale, that dream was continue working in the UFO CAT. And that was Will Smith, was a physicist from Uruguay, was a kind of a sidekick. Also, he traveled with him, coming to international conventions and summits and research. And we helped that UFO cat from the late 70s to the 80s. Also, Spain was Vicente Ballester Olmos, a serious researcher who put in computer, but also he worked for IBM. The leader of my group too, he was a computer analyst, and we converged. And Hynek, he liked that. Also, Ballet was informed, and the UFO cat was created. We created a system called Argent Cat in our cases, but they were all kind of connected and exchanging information. And Hynek was always tell us, it's a time of harvest. So it's a time of recollection in the best way we can, with the more seriousness. And also he was alert of all the charlatanism. He was trying to escape from all the contactee movement, who always was constant, not only US, but in the rest of the world, and to see what also, he was visiting Europe. He was in Hesdalen with all the Norwegians, ufologists who also have some physicists studying this kind of the phenomenon. Italy with the Kuhn, with Pinotti, and having seeing the phenomenon was global. No matter, the ufology started to be kind of more America, but America is the king of the media, no, of the communication, and it was already in 47, and it's today, and the news is spread all over, and it's the center of the empire. But in science, in cutting edge, in culture, and many other kind of, well, culture between quotes, you know, of subcultures, subculture. And Hynek was telling us, this is the time of recollection, the time of harvesting. And we are kind of picking all this information, and maybe in the future, another generation, but I don't think he was telling us, we are going to see the end of the tunnel of the mystery. We're now going to resolve today the full spectrum of these ufological enigmas. But with the information you are kind of recollecting, publishing in magazines and bulletins, and creating these catalogs of statistics, that will be help to create a model. But the predictive model, I think, with running of the times and so many kind of different school of approach, the psychological school, the philosophical school, the real physical extraterrestrial theory, which is still dominant but challenging for the Fortean phenomena and the phenomenologic school, mixing with new kind of backflash, kind of as coming back to the 60s and 50s, or to the Cold War, as to the stars, and I start to see the phenomenon of dangerous to our planet. We have all this in and out kind of I don't know, moving forward, and also involutions. And always we are in the world of ideas, but the science, the scientific method, we cannot approach. And it's that was kind of I think Hynek finished his days with a lot of deception, with the deception of his pals, the people who were offering so much, and they don't give anything. For example, Dr. Hynek gave $1,000 for Julian Michael Phillips to work in the film. And also I was with David Jacobs recently, and he told me that anecdote. What he told Allen, look, they announced Close Encounters of the Third Kind in the newspapers. No, I don't believe it. Nobody asked me to use the name. The same thing happened with the Hynek sons. They didn't know History was doing the series either. Yeah. I said we have a kind of this kind of evolution, but I think he was seeing, and the scientific ufology was kind of coming down. All the groups were not united, the constant wars, the constant egos. You have always the same kind of talking heads. It's a group. You see in the convention the same people, and sometimes the more delirious is the one in the conducting the orchestra, and I saw that in many congresses, not only here but all over the world. That kind of no finding a line. The line, the horizon is kind of shaky. And again, well, for example, the disclosure. Yeah, we remember we brought Hynek to try to dialogue with the Air Force in the 80s in my country, my original country. It was a crash, was a kind of a mysterious kind of blue spot in the Andes, and we couldn't get any information from the military, from the aerospace division, and we were kind of trying to see if maybe we open some kind of communication. That was an early movement to start a cooperation between the countries to disclosure, no? And well, I never get the final report of that case, but there were other ones, before, and the wave of 1978, and there were some, well, in the last 20 years, were some openings of another countries in Europe and South America to open the way, and still using some scientists beyond an invisible college in every country to dedicate to the phenomena. But I think it's still, we don't see the light in the end of the tunnel. Also with the media, and I could talk for hours about the role of the media. The media.
Well, let me jump in here real quick. I think we have seen a little bit more related to that invisible college you're talking about over the last year or so. That does seem to be happening at least a little bit. We're going to have Diana Pasulka on in a couple weeks talking a little bit more about that. So that is, I think, maybe cracking a little bit. So there might be some light at the end of the tunnel, at least in that department. At least here in the States.
Yeah. I'm interested to know about Diana. Yes.
Yep.
Alex, I did have another question related to the technology that we were just talking about, and that is regarding the IBM system, the UFO CAT, that uses statistics to understand the behavior of the phenomena and make predictive models of sightings. Did Dr. Vallée, the computer scientist, create this program?
No, exactly. Was a combine. Was not only himself. We use some of his typologies, his classification, but it was a combined effort. It was a combined system. Yes.
Oh, okay. So,
in the UFOCAT, use some of the Vallée influence, of course.
Okay. So again, just not to interrupt, but I got to do it here because you guys do bring it up. Also, Tom DeLonge and Lou Elizondo were in Italy a few months back doing a presentation in Rome, I assume, about what they're up to. And one of the things that DeLonge said that he was working on was a type of a UFO database that was going to be able to go in and analyze and maybe do predictions, that type of thing. Not sure exactly how it's going to manifest itself, but that is one of the things he talked about. And one of the things that we talked about was that particular, Alex and I, one of the things that we talked about a few weeks back was regarding their appearance over in Italy. And what did you think about all that?
Yes, I remember. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, I was informed, and I just show it and give us a premiere to the American audiences in my MUFON lecture in Philadelphia. And I think it's very interesting to see they get invited by the Kuhn, and as they were looking to start to kind of recollect and do comparison with international ufology. And I hope it's for pure science and not for the defense mentality or trying to kind of extract some kind of elements that goes beyond ufology. I don't know if you understand my position regarding to analyze that. I think they went to kind of, to have access to the old files. For the Kuhn have thousands of cases collected and investigated with a lot of kind of dedication of 50, 60 years. But as the colleagues of the Kuhn were telling me, Centro Ufologico Nazionale is Kuhn, no?
Okay.
And the leader is Roberto Pinotti, my old friend, who also organized that the best international congress used to happen. Well, it's still happening in San Marino, Republic of San Marino, who is a country inside of the country. Still, we are in Italy. And in that congress, we saw so many kind of interesting things happen, as was the first time Corso talked in public about his experience and his theories, and for example. But the Italians were telling me, we were expecting we are going to receive some kind of news or some update of 1 year ago. That was the big expectation. And they don't really bring anything new.
They gave them a history lesson, basically. Probably told them a bunch of things they already knew. There were a couple nuggets in there that were interesting. It was interesting to see essentially Elizondo's history lesson, the history of UFOs according to Lou Elizondo. But aside from that, there wasn't a whole lot new. It was just interesting hearing it come from him.
Right. Yeah, it's a good speaker, as we listened to him during the Congress, or the MUFON National Congress. But Elizondo, I was trying to interview him also for the Spanish media, and he was kind of very kind of type of Hollywood figure, but you have to have kind of previous entanglement or kind of have access to the public relation office. And I see. Yeah, I said.
Well, I see you got a picture of him. That must have been in Jersey last summer. I see you got a picture of him. We got that up right now. So you got close to him anyway.
Yeah, the Cherry Hill. Yeah, so I was a big disappointed, but he kind of he was interesting to speak in Spanish for also my followers and my audience. As I write, I have columns in the Spanish language about ufology. But and he came to see once. I remember I was kind of talking in one corner with Travis Walton. I said, "Oh, I don't forget you. We will." But finally, he disappeared, and I try to get that interview, to have access, to do exchange also. To see what is the position with the international things. As many of us, we could really kind of cooperate for that union. But I think is again, we start to see the separation of ufology, no? But I'm very kind of, we have to be thanks to him as the disclosure of 1 year ago through the DOD gestion, as the change how the media was seeing now the ufologists had been a positive. We were expecting, now we expect too much, but in the moment, 1 year ago, I remember I was, the day before, I was with Neil deGrasse Tyson in a lecture he was giving in New Jersey. And after the lecture, I went to say hello, but I already met him, and we honor in my club, the Explorers Club, years ago, a couple of years ago. And when I mentioned, I asked a question to backstage, and I said how we could back to have a scientific kind of approach. How we could have a approach between ufologists and scientists, a kind of a cooperation. And he started to kind of laugh. He said, but UFOs, kind of abductions, where are UFOs? Everybody have... He started to scream. All the people were looking at me. I get very embarrassed. But
yeah.
That's
pretty much his MO.
But the next day was Elizondo announcing in the New York Times, and that was the people started to don't really laugh, and I think the one who laughed last will be better. I think we're welcome to have international cooperation. I hope, but knowing the way we could set is the Monroe Doctrine, no? That's American for the American. I said Americans for the war. I said that cooperation was what Hynek envisioned until his death, until 1986, when he was still alive. He was trying to see the ufology was a good communion between serious field researchers, ufologists, and the universities in every country, and also, the military forces working together, that kind of thing. But that is very idealistic, and it's not going to happen. Never is going to happen either. Unfortunately, we have to be realistic, and if we mix the subject of defense, and we're coming back, looks like we are coming back to the Panel Robertson in 1953.
Maybe there's talk of that. There's talk of briefings up on Capitol Hill, so we'll see.
But I think, Hynek will be disappointed how the media are treating the subject, and we don't have any really breaking through kind of scientific investigation. 20 years ago was the Sturrock panel, the Peter Sturrock.
Yep, Professor Sturrock from Stanford.
Right, and Hynek always talked very good about him, and we have to follow. And that was the last great event on ufology, was in 1997.
Yeah.
But from there, we have a scattered kind of movement, but we don't have really new cases or who really bring us to create a new fervor, a new enthusiasm. All this attention of Blue Book, we are frozen in the 1950s. I say that is very coincidental, no?
Yes, it's ironic.
And ideological, no? We back again to the Cold War. We like this kind of series as the Americans, the Mad Men, but I'm thinking in the young people, we don't have role models.
Right. Yes,
we don't have Sagan is dead. Neil deGrasse Tyson is in the shadow. Cousteau died many years ago. We have the kind of some television anchors with are very kind of disappointed and more humoristical than serious. But what is the new generation? What is seen?
I think that's a really important point that you're bringing up. It kind of leads me to a slightly different question and topic. And What I wanted to ask you was, since you're from South America and have an Italian background, have you observed any difference in how the Italian and the Latino world perceives UFO phenomena versus the United States?
Oh yes, I start to see it in my trips after living a period here, and I start to travel back and working in projects in Europe and South America. I start to see this more opening here, and the people in the streets, also in the pilot projects in Europe, starting with our neighbor country, our Mexican brothers. You could see how the people are open, and you have the phenomenon of floating in their heads. That is, and in the volcano area in Mexico City, the most populated area, is an integration of the phenomena. The people are not afraid, and you could talk with the pilots, and they tell you, and they help you, and they turn friends, and they kind of reveal information in the towers and things. Here, every trip I do, I go to the cockpits. Yeah, now 20 years ago, and they get sometimes they get funny, no? They get you incommodate many of the pilots during the questions. They said, "No, I cannot talk," and I said, "But I didn't have any experience, but I have one of my friends," and that kind of different kind of nervousism. I don't think a pilot in South America, Brazil, and Chile will we have problems if he talk to a journalist or to a ufologist about that. Yeah, I remember kind of I was coming from France to the US and Air France, and I went to us, and the pilots so kind of happy to. They were fans. The French loved the subject. They invited me there to the cockpit. We were drinking champagne. We were landing. We were landing in Los Angeles. Said, well, yeah, but that kind of thing. Yes, but now it's changing. I think after the rise of ancient aliens, and after the comunicado of the DOD, Elizondo last year, also there are kind of changing in the tension of people who were, for example, pilots. I remember Hynek used to give so much importance, not only Hynek, but Dr. Richard Hines too, to the pilot testimony, the professionals, police forces, army forces, kind of defense personnel, or fire department, firefighters, or would have some more skills and some capacity of observation, or some kind of professional background to endorse the sightings. But I think that are the changes. But I see, of course, outside of the states are more opening. There are less tension in the professional lab, and also in the ordinary people, no? And it's in Chile they do these festivals, and it's wine and UFOs, no? Kind of.
Yeah.
And it's the day of UFOs in this town, in another town, and they are welcome, and they make a landing track. They go to do constant night watches or stargazing, but there are UFO gazing, in hot spots, no? I'm talking about in many countries, as Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico, of course, and UFO watchers, Spain, the France is very open, the British too, and you have all the countries in Central Europe, in the East, in the Orient, you have Japan, very open too. And as I also in my lecture, I was talking about this new event what China is bringing the Academy of Science of China in collusion, in union with the Academy of Science of Russia, and also media companies, to do these congressional events. Since last October, since last summer to October was the last event in Moscow, organized also by the Chinese, and the Chinese was always very rigid. I remember years ago, one of the few ufologists, Sun Shili, he was kind of very afraid to talk about, no matter he was invited to ufological conventions in our soil. But now it's changing, and there are media companies. It's a media, the media, television companies and mediatic companies, press, etc., organizing this event. And the purpose of this new global union is they're inviting many of the commissions in Europe and South America who are already disclosure. And the governments are kind of working with the civilians ufologists. Yeah, and they kind of believe the phenomena is a real phenomena with big percentage is extraterrestrial, and they don't hide it to say that. That's the French never neither, and the Italians neither too. And this movement is targeting in 2019, excuse me, to bring it to the UN through the UNESCO, but no as a pressure for disclosure, but as a cultural kind of opening. They said it's cultural penetration, but nobody talk about this with all these kind of bloggers and all these kind of radio talks, and nobody give importance to this event. And I just talk in my lecture in Philadelphia, also as a premiere, but I was presuming people of open minds or others, they were giving some kind of really to follow up of this story, but I think nobody's really giving so much attention as it's a kind of is out of the record, no? And it's a kind of also mystery, no?
Well, if it's not happening in the United States, it's not happening, I guess, as far as a lot of people are concerned.
Okay, right. It's the Monroe Doctrine, yes, I know.
Alex, you wrote a book on parallel dimensions. The question I have for you is, can the UFO phenomenon eventually be explained by quantum physics, or is it outside the realm of mathematics?
Most mathematics is a kind of a projection of the imagination. I don't put the hands on the fire of the arithmetics, geometries of mathematics. And the parallel worlds, it's kind of an explanation of many things, and also is a theoretical thing, had been from the Greeks to our Einstein type of philosophy, epistemology. I think it's the phenomenic world is something we cannot really capture or we cannot really measure, neither with all the mathematical paradigms. We know exist kind of these hot spots, vortex, where there is more chance of concentration of phenomena, no? And our mind going to the paranormal element is connected. So our mind is connected with latitude and longitude. That was the creation of remote viewing. Is another subject we didn't talk, but that connect with the new bug or the new wave of ufology too, and that connect with all this kind of disclosure, connecting Bigelow with Reed and the stars and Hal Puthoff, and nobody's doing a deep analysis of that thing. An analysis to find a kind of creative way of cooperation, no? Where is how everything is converging to a positive answer, no? Also a constructive way. But here we are all together in this. We are one toward a future, no? and we want that future be good and be kind of constructive and equal for all.
That's what we're trying to work towards here.
Very good.
Alex, you sent...
Yeah, the Parallel Worlds, yeah, it was a book I wrote in early age. I never have the chance to publish in English. I would like to concentrate in the next couple of years to do a kind of a reedition and bilingual new edition on that.
That would be great. By the way, you sent Frank a really wonderful picture of yourself and Dr. Hynek standing together many years ago, and you're standing there with a really wonderful expression on your face, and you're holding a folder. I was going to ask you, what was in that folder you were holding while you were standing next to Dr. Hynek?
Of course, were my case on field research.
Okay.
Alan liked my kind of drawings, and in that trip I think was Willie Smith. Willie Smith was reading, and I think he brought it to the States. And imagine there are in Evanston, yeah, in the basement of Mark Rodiger, that drawings. And I think, yeah, I was, of course, I was exchanging. I was trying to reconstruct some cases, and we worked together in the time. I don't know if it was that trip, but we spent a weekend in the Andes. And also I brought more cases. And I remember we analyzed a sighting I researched in 1980 was a floating giant city, was a floating city. And many people of the peasants and the rural, and it was in a rural area, the people who were living in these towns and little villages were defining as a city similar to the last ship in Close Encounters, the mothership, with kind of above with floating cities with streets, forests, kind of something fantastic. And we were kind of analyzing the possibility of that case was a mirage. That was an area where it was very desertic, and finally we get the conclusion was not mirage, was a case he helped me to investigate, to analyze, for example. But in that folders, I was presenting case by case and said, Alan, please, what do you think about this? Yeah, what is about this? And I was doing a lot of questions. And he was very good in doing questions too. Yeah. And he was a good he was doing good question. And I was too. I always have that tendency to do too many questions.
Frank, I did have a few questions left, not that many, but I did want to ask Alex, Robert Bigelow, the American businessman, and you crossed paths. In what way did you do that?
Oh, Bigelow, kind of 20 years ago or more, he have an institute in Las Vegas called National Institute of Discovery Science. And he was already in the mid-90s creating also an invisible college with scientists who were under payroll, or they were guests of the group. The group was headed by Con Kelleher, who, with John Alexander, found I was depositary. I was the holder of the last manuscript of the last director of Blue Book, Hector Quintanilla. Quintanilla wrote a fantastic book which you could access online. I gave it to Bigelow, 18 years ago, and to be published. I was the editor and co-publisher with the son of Quintanilla, and in that time, we kind of, the only thing we received was a copy of the book. We couldn't really get the printing. The idea was to have a publishing printing of the book. And it was funny, but when in the middle 80s, after the death of Hynek, I didn't want to deal with anything with the UFO. Was the same period I get very stressed, and I said, I don't know where I'm going. And I was working in video production. Was my second year in the States, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, I want to introduce you to a guy. You could work with us in this post production. It's an art gallery. We do video art." I said, "Okay." And what is his name? Quintanilla. I said, "Don't tell me it's related to Quintanilla." And Quintanilla is a very common name. There are many Quintanillas. And I went to see it and to meet, oh, yeah, hi, Carl. I said, "Don't tell me you are the son of Hector Quintanilla." "Yes, I am." There was 1 in 1 million. And just when I didn't want nothing to do with UFOs, he came and he gave, "Look, this is the manuscript of my father." And later on, I met his father, and we spent time. Also, we did a video on before he died, and we do very specific questions, and he helped me with that, his son, and we do a kind of a segment on the Socorro case, who was the more famous case, and I found Quintanilla was a serious researcher, and he started also as Hynek to start to believe life in other universes and the possibility of they could come. The Socorro case was an opening eyes for him, and no matter he have so many fights with Hynek, yeah, during that time, and he also Quintanilla was involved with the panel Robertson before, and he was the last director from '63 to '69, and this manuscript called UFOs and Air Force Dilemma, but the original title, you could see is not there. It's called a $300,000 fiasco. He thought the taxpayers really wasted money, but the Air Force couldn't really prove the existence of the UFOs, no. And he said the previous kind of director was Ruppelt, and the one before him, I don't remember the name now, is African American. Also, we visit and we
Bob
interview.
Friend. I think you're talking Bob Friend.
I was in his house, and we were remembering Quintanilla after Quintanilla died, and we spent a good time with many very funny stories. And yeah, we went with Antonio Juneus, who was the international coordinator of MUFON in Los Angeles, to interview Mr. Frank. And that was Quintanilla was a physicist, and he really was an example. Was a guy who crossed the Rio Grande. He was illegal alien, but he make a superation in his life. He get an education. He turned kind of a very good range in the Air Force, and kind of he now is a historical character. Yeah, and in some degree, but he wrote very interesting essay on the UFOs. And only Ruppelt before he wrote a couple books, but Quintanilla was equal, and he narrate many kind of interesting stories, and he does some mathematical and interpretations too. Well, he liked mathematics. Yeah, he liked. Yeah.
I had a question for you about Dr. Vallée, who is a computer scientist, a venture capitalist, an author, an iconic ufologist, and an astronomer. And he currently resides in San Francisco, California. What kind of relationship did you have with Dr. Vallée? Are you friends? And if so, have you maintained communication with him after all these years of knowing him?
No, with Vallée, unfortunately, I was in South America with kind of he eluded us, but no matter he knows we were part of the UFOCAT, he was invited by another ufologist who was the other ufologist. He was in the commercial line, and he invited him, and that showed how he was. And I met for the first time. Well, I went to a lecture he gave when I was in with that group in the time just before we start to work with Hynek, and he kind of eluded us, and we were very disappointed. But no matter, we were kind of fans. We were all kids. What we were open to the paranormal hypothesis, and we had been reading Passport to Magonia, but unfortunately, then in that time we didn't have the chance to meet, and all this time he was kind of always in his his ivory tower, and I didn't have the chance. No matter I all these years in the state, also in California, he was ignoring my writings, and until I met him in last year in a tribute to another friend who was a pioneer in the remote viewing thing, and he was there, and I tried to continue the communication, but after that I didn't really kind of continue the communication. I would like to reconnect with him, and also he wrote a foreword to a book about Fatima and the UFOs, and he wrote 2 pages about one of my cases of 1978, who was also very favorite from Dr. Hynek, a case where the object was projecting beams through a compact light of beam. And Ballet, he get kind of very obsessive with that case. It's called La Dulce case, and it's
there's a few cases like that with the sometimes a cone-shaped beam coming out of a UFO down to the ground. There have been a few cases that have turned up like that recently. There was a case right next to my hometown in Wanacue, New Jersey, back in '64.
Right.
Yep. So that's a very famous case, and a good friend of mine, Tony Brugaglia, has written a lot about that case. I'll send you a couple links to some stories he's written about that.
Yes.
And there's a couple others out there that have turned up like that. Unfortunately, the details elude me, so I won't go into them. But I can turn those up and get those over to you.
Yes, Wanaki, I was trying to kind of make a review, and when I was working in the UFO Hunters, we did an episode about the Wanake, and the production asked me to contact the former cops who were witnesses, and I was calling.
They're still around.
Yeah, but I never visited the reservoir, but I had been recollecting some information about the area, and it's a very interesting representative case of the ufology of New Jersey. But coming back to Ballet, Ballet was kind of always very cryptic character. He show up, he disappear, he kind of ally himself, depend of the current. And I am very disappointed. I'm very disappointed with Jacques Ballet. I'm very disappointed with Dolan too. But there are going to be in the Project Blue Book afterwards comments on interviews in the series. After every show, some of the luminaries of the ufology, they're going to make some comments. And Ballet, of course, he didn't lose his opportunity to be. But coming back, Ballet was fascinated with my case of La Dulce, with making comparison with the Fatima, the Virgin of Fatima apparition.
Yes, the miracle of Fatima.
Right, Our Lady of Fatima, and he's have the interpretation of Fatima was an ufological event, as also he wrote in one of his books. Yeah, and I think an anatomy of the phenomenon. That means, he wrote 2 pages, but he was not capable to contact me, who I was the field researcher of the case, who put the case on the map and had been in many books, kind of published with my drawings too, and also in the column, in the page of Linda Moulton Howe, she make also a comparison between that and religious apparitions.
Yeah.
But
Ballet.
Ballet is a great philosopher of ufology.
Yeah, he has a different hypothesis, as you know, about the UFO phenomenon regarding a multidimensional visitation hypothesis, which is it represents an extension of the ETH, where the alleged terrestrials could be potentially from anywhere. Entities could be multidimensional beyond space-time and thus could coexist with humans yet remain undetected. There's a lot more to it than that, but he has a very different viewpoint than others in the field of ufology about the UFO phenomenon.
Well, yes, but if you see the theory of Ballet, the paraphysics, the paranormal, finally is very similar to the John Keel, the super spectrum theory, and Keel was not a scientist, and he went direct to the point. Yeah, and it's or you approach in the scientific level or you approach in the paranormal level. But when you are kind of digging in different kind of pits, I don't know, the water gets more murky, and it's but it depends of the point of view. But I think I remember I used to talk with Hynek about the theories of ballet, and he was disappointed. And I just published an interview I interviewed Allen in tape and transcribed that interview of 1980, what he thinks ballet lost his track with the messenger of deception when he gave importance to the cult and to the contactee groups. No, for him was a very big disappointed, and I have it in tape his comments on that. Yeah,
wanted to also make a comment that Dr. Jacques Vallée has also been associated with Robert Bigelow recently as a consultant to the National Institute for Discovery Science and a member of the Scientific Advisory Board of Bigelow Aerospace. I had a question that I wanted to ask you, Alex, and that is, moving on, regarding what you had to say about Project Blue Book and how you feel that project was taken from you. This can't be the period at the end of the sentence for you. What long-term projects do you have that you can share with us that you look forward to?
I am afraid to comment. You don't want to see it in Discovery Channel. You want to see the National Geographic, but I have people following my steps. But it's funny what Discovery asks you to present. You cannot pitch the stories, but you could put your stories in a kind of web page, what is a producer's menu type of a production page, and this, in the moment you hang up that your pitch and your development, you're risky. Everybody could walk with that, and you don't have any way to control who is seeing what you are posting, no? Yeah, and this kind of thing that is I recommend to the young people, to the people without not experience, and they have good ideas. Be careful when you present ideas. Yeah, no matter the people, no. And I recommend that also for the young generation. Well, now we are in a video age. We are in kind of a digital age, where you could produce content, and these guys development, they're sitting, warming their chairs, heating their chairs, and they don't really sweat for find kind of new ideas. That is the reason every show is the same as the other, but it's a copycat of the previous one. But some people with idealistic things and good ideas or good research, they could be victims of this kind of tank shark or shark tank. But and there are many dolphins out there who kind of be kind of propitiatory victims of this system, no, this kind of content system. But thanks God, when we have many things and you could do productions for more independent companies, or iTunes, or Netflix, etc., or Amazon, etc. But coming back to your question, you could repeat again the last
Yes,
part?
sure. Absolutely. It's regarding what you had to say about Project Blue Book and how you felt that the project was taken from you. And I was just saying, it seems like this can't be the end of it for you. There's got to be more regarding long-term projects and goals that you have. What are some of those goals?
So now I start the translation of the MUFON Field Investigator to Spanish. That is for create new fields, investigators and research south of the border. That is I am happy with this mission to have this fantastic handbook created by MUFON years ago, I don't know how many, 50 years ago already, 40 years, no, 50 years ago, yes. That was one of my projects I am working. I am developing other kind of mystery series, but I'm not going to mention about that, and your penetration. But I could exchange it with you in a private model. Yeah, but I have the new series in archaeology and other specials in ufology, and also I'm kind of looking to join forces with already outgoing project with a feature film and UFOs, a couple ones. And also I'm working in a project about, we don't know if it's going to film or television, on the Pascagoula case.
Oh, that's a great case.
Yes, that is a great case. That's an iconic case.
Yeah, I spent 20 years ago. I spent time a week with Hickson, with Charlie Hickson and his family, and I interviewed him at Deep. And well, my story is based in that week, spending with the Hickson family and reconstructing the case. Yeah, that was what I wrote an article, a long article about the case in a Spanish magazine only. And that is it. But I have another rabbits in my top hat.
So that means that you actually spoke with Calvin Parker. Is that correct?
No, Hickson.
Yeah, there were two guys. It was Hickson and Parker.
Yeah. Okay.
No, Calvin Parker is another project a friend of mine have, Philip Mantle. We working together also to do something, but Parker is I think is working with a producer who also I am in contact. Maybe we are going to do something together.
I see.
Merging with him. But my take is more with the story of Hickson, what I interview him for a long week I spent in Pascagoula, Mississippi. a hot summer, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Wow. Frank, did you have any questions?
No, well, I do, but we're going to get to them when Alex comes back next month, and we get a bunch of UFO researchers from South America to talk about UFOs in that continent, and that's going to be a great show. So I'm going to hold all those questions until then, but I do have plenty more, that's for sure.
Well, I did have one last question, and that is if you wanted to say anything about the topic of ufology in a macro way, just in a general way, what would you have to say about that?
Well, I think ufology is could be a blessing or could be a curse, depending on your perspective and depending on the time of your life. And it's some kind of itchiness you cannot leave behind very easily. And it's still, you have to be conscious of everything converge. Okay, well, we are curious of the mysteries of the past, and the mystery of the present, and a light in the sky that connect with our ancestors and connect with our question, and in our their personal kind of search, or kind of our personal illumination, where we have so many dark sides and we have so many dark spots in our past, on our previous lives, that are knocking the door of our present consciousness. And kind of the miracle of life is something we are not totally conscious all the time, and we try to continue, and we are distracted for our daily work and our daily preoccupations, but in everything we have to see this kind of miracle of life, and is also us continue asking if it's a God there, and is this kind of solitude we think, or sometimes we feel we are, is not totally true, and we are not alone. We are not alone in this runaway. This runaway, yeah, could be deep to the ocean of our consciousness, or secret of our own life, or this runaway launching ourselves to the stars. And is I think is our existence is very precious, and the important thing also is to leave a kind of a message, to do some kind of work and leave it for the next generations, and do it in the best way we can, no? And it's and also it's important to do it in a true way, and trying to kind of do it without that consequence. All we started the conversation with this series, and this series is a kind of it's
not
a
a true way. I would say it's not a true way.
It's a detour. It's a detour. It's not totally light. If you see of television today, it's so dark. It's so kind of violence, a kind of thing, and the purpose of that violence is profiting. What they have to make money, and that is not the way, a kind of thing.
Well, Alex, Ancient Aliens kind of proves that. They are very enthusiastic about their subject there. There's nothing dark about that show at all.
No, that is solid. But in general, other things we see in television. No, Ancient Aliens is good for this. Is take the religion. Only if they talk the Bible and the Old Testament, we have a lot of yeah, and it's kind of the stories of Solomon and Moses and the Ark of Covenant and the kind of things. But in general, talking, go to watch the movies you have in your menu.
Oh, understood. But my point is that you can be positive and still be very successful. That's my key point.
Right, but yeah, but that's an at least it's not sex and violence.
Right.
Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with good sex. Yeah, violence, yes. But
Well, it's been a really fabulous show. We had the opportunity to cover a lot of ground today regarding the topic of ufology, and also discuss really iconic people in the field of ufology, such as Dr. J. Allen Hynek, Dr. Jacques Vallée. We even got to talk a little bit about John Keel and some really important cases in the field of ufology. And also, it's been a real pleasure and a privilege to have you on the show, Alex. You are deeply involved in the international film and television production of this topic. I bet it's been quite a ride for you.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm still trying to do things, no matter.
Thanks so much, Alex. Looking forward to having you back on again next month when our mutual friend King Eddie returns from his world tour. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a fun show, actually. And also coming up this coming weekend, we're having a Nimitz Super Show with Dave Beatty and Kevin Day, who was the radar operator on the Princeton during that incident. And, of course, Dave has produced the Nimitz Encounters, a very serious look, a very factual look at one of the sorties that encountered the phenomenon out on the Pacific coast back in 2004, I believe it was, off the top of my head. And so we're going to cover that in a lot of detail. And in 2 weeks, we're going to have Dr. Diana Pasulka talking about her new book, American Cosmic, which you can pick up now, I'm sure, probably over at Amazon and just about anywhere else that good books are sold. So again, Alex, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Thanks to you, Frank.
Thank you, Alex, for having been on the show today.
Yeah, it was a great hour. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Chant, it was a pleasure as always. We'll wrap things up and have a good night, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.